Alright everybody, welcome back to Conquer and Commander. Today I am done with the precons and we're going to be looking at a deck featuring Melek, Izzet, Paragon here. He's a new Dragon's Maze commander. And this deck actually came about because somebody way back when I did the Vish Call deck, Together Gutless, said, hey, I was wondering, could you do Melek with Dragonstorm type deck? I was like, wow, that's not really my style. I'll see what I can do. And he put out another, a few more little suggestions with Scroll Rack and Parallel Thoughts and stuff like that. But he really wanted to see Dragonstorm, so I put this little bad boy together. And basically, I'm not going to lie to you and say this is the most competitive deck in the world, but it actually holds its own and it does pretty well. Melek, as you guys know, is an Izzet commander for 6 mana who basically copies the instants and sorceries that are played off the top of your deck. And when I'm approaching this deck, I want it, obviously I got to use Dragonstorm, which means I need dragons. Unfortunately, that means that the dragons kind of clog up the top of your deck, so that's a little bit of a workaround you got to think about. It also means that you've got to try and clear off the top of your deck when needed. So let's just go ahead and start off with the lands here. The lands are fairly self-explanatory. I did include all 7 fetch lands that fit into the deck, just in case I do need to clear off the top of the deck. This is also good for cards like Scroll Rack and Brainstorm, so that you can get rid of stuff that's clogging up your hand, typically dragons and stuff like that. In addition, the deck includes the 2 artifact lands, Seed of the Synod and Great Furnace. I'm not sure where Great Furnace is right here. So that they can be searched up for with Tezzeret. And then it also has a bunch of lands that can tap for 2 mana. Stuff like Ancient Tomb, and I even throw in, Dormant Volcano and here it is, Coral Atoll, Dormant Volcano, and then it's got Strip Mine and stuff like that. And the final piece of the puzzle is Bosiju. I never ran up against a counterspell deck, but it's worth having just in case you want to push something through. You basically want all the lands that tap for 2 mana, because when you want to go off, you're gonna need a ton of mana. So speaking of a ton of mana, let's look at all the mana that we have here. The mana help. We got a lot of cheap artifacts like Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Soul Ring, Grim Monolith, Izzet Signet, Coalition Relic, Crucible of Worlds, which is good when you have a fetch land in your graveyard, Solemn Simulacrum, Gilded Lotus. And these are other things where sometimes you're going to get stuck with them on the top of your library and you're not going to be able to play them if Melek's out there. So that's something to consider. We've also got instants and sorceries like Seething Song, Inner Fire, Mana Geyser, which typically brings a ton of mana. Tezzeret I use to search up mana sources, and if I have enough mana sources, I start using him to untap my mana artifacts. Like I can have Grim Monolith and Mana Vault out there, and I'll tap them for mana, and I'll untap them and tap them for more mana with Tezzeret. Turnabout is an untapper of land usually. Mana Drain is going to help me get extra mana. Drain Power was hit or miss, but it ended up doing well when it was really good. In a lot of decks, especially online, people tap out when they don't have anything to do, and so Drain Power hurts me when people tap out all the time. If people don't tap out, then I can use their mana to my advantage. And I actually had Hypersonic Dragon out one time, and I managed to Drain Power somebody during their upkeep and use that mana to cast a Boggart and Hellkite. So, it can come in handy. The 3 big spells in the deck are, of course, the Dragonstorm, which was the main reason behind making the deck. But I also put Epic Experiment in. Admittedly, this isn't a spell slinger, like all spells kind of deck, all instants and sorceries, but most of the time, about a third of the stuff that you hit is going to be an instant or a sorcery in this deck. I recommend that you never cast this for lower than 9 mana, just in case you do hit Dragonstorm. You don't want to lose it and not have to send it into your graveyard or something like that. The other good thing about Epic Experiment is that it does you actually cast the cards in order, so it helps with like your storm count and stuff like that. I also threw in Mind's Desire based upon a recommendation from a friend, noting that Epic Experiment doesn't hit every card, but Mind's Desire will. And you can have pretty big storm counts, and Mind's Desire can put a bunch of stuff on the table for you. So those are your big spells, and obviously, you can have pretty decent storm counts with this deck. The deck does have a little bit of like removal and answers, but they're all pretty cheap. Vandal Blast, Starstorm gets rid of creatures. Oblivion Stone is your one wiper. Pongify and Rapid Hybridization are good at getting rid of creatures and are cheap to cast. Echoing Truth can bounce a problem permanent. And then you got Cyclonic Rift, which can bounce everybody's else's permanents. I thought I had another one, but I can't remember. I'm completely blanking on. There's another Washout. Washout's another mass bounce spell that I had in an early version of the deck, but I guess I pulled it out. Okay, never mind. Let's just skip over here, and there's a couple cards that are good at casting stuff either off the top of your library or stacking the top of your library. Soothsaying is an old school Mercadian Masks card that'll let you dig deep, and if you really need to, shuffle your library. And Scroll Rack is good at putting stuff back on top of your library. In addition, you got Magus of the Future and... Oops, I didn't mean to remove him. He's in the deck. And Future Sight, which do the same thing and can put stuff out into play from the top of your library. Because there are dragons, there are artifacts and stuff like that you're going to want to play, and that, of course, that increases your storm count as well. I admit that Sensei's Divining Top is not in this deck, and it would be very good in this deck. It's just my personal hatred for the card is the only reason why I don't have it in here. I admit it's a little hypocritical to have Scroll Rack and complain about Sensei's Divining Top, but I just don't like the card, and I kind of as a rule never include it, but if you like it, I would throw it in. Let's take a look at the dragons we have here. I'll admit the biggest problem with this deck is that even if you have a big Dragon Storm, most of the time you cannot kill the table. So you're going to want dragons that come out with haste or hit hard or do something else. Obviously Anger and Dragon Breath are going to help out a little bit, but you're not always going to have them in the graveyard. Your biggest bad boy typically is Hellkite Igniter. A lot of times you're going to have extra red mana left over, and you're going to have a bunch of artifacts, and he's going to come out hasty, and he can put the hurtin' on somebody real quick. So you can shove all your red mana into him. The other haste guys are like Rorik's Bladewing, who's just a big hasty beater. Hellkite Charger. If there was a way to save your mana through the turn, it would be awesome, because then you could use the Charger to untap. Because I had plenty of games where I just had plenty of extra red mana, but I couldn't bring it over into my attack step and use it for the Charger, and that made me really sad. Hypersonic Dragon's another hasty dragon. Utvara Hellkite is good at being able to make a huge number of dragons. Bogarden Hellkite, it's a flash and can do some damage. Balefire Dragon is good at creature control. And Hellkite Tyrant is used mainly to steal opposing mana rocks. I never cast him, actually, and I never really brought him out too often. So he could hurt you if somebody stole him or something like that, but that never happened. And then Steel Hellkite, of course, is a nice bit of removal as well. Your number 2 most important dragon is Niv-Mizzet Draco Genius. Niv-Mizzet is good because he can help fill your hand after you dump it. So these are the guys that made the cut. Now, there is a little bit of recursion in the deck. Time Spiral isn't technically recursion, but it can get all your stuff back into your deck when necessary. But we do have our Chaomancer, Snapcaster Mage, and Spell Twine. I thought about Diluvian Primordial, but it just costs too much mana most of the time to really do what I wanted it to do. And I know that's a little crazy considering I've got Spell Twine in here, but Spell Twine can copy something in my own graveyard, and I found that there were a lot of times when people's graveyards didn't have anything that I needed, and Diluvian Primordial would have just been like a big flyer. And then we've got a bunch of drawing and sifting cards, Ponder, Brainstorm, a couple of tutors, and Mystical and Personal Tutor. These are great for putting on top of your library when Melek is out there. Serum Visions, Impulse, Twin Cast, which can copy any of the stuff. You've got Call to Mind, Compulsive Research, Fabricate. Call to Mind is recursion, my bad. Compulsive Research, Fabricate's another tutor to get whatever artifact you have. Frantic Search is nice just because it digs a little deeper and you can net mana if you have a land that taps for 2. Thirst for Knowledge, and Jace. Jace is good at clearing the top of your library, and then Factor Fiction as well. Alright, and then finally I did include one Time Walk effect, and that's Time Warp, and that's mainly because, you know, sometimes you just want to end the game, and you Dragonstorm for a bunch, and you're able to search something up, and you Time Warp, and if you've got Advara Hellkite out there, you should have enough dragons typically to end the game. And, you know, you have ability to, you know, replay it if you really need to as well. I know that people like putting extra turn effects in the decks, in their Melek decks, but I thought one was more than enough. So that's the deck. Basically, you know, it can have it goes into like basic two types of methods of play. The first method is like we turn into a dirtily storm deck, and you're like messing with your scroll rack, and you're doing stuff on the top of your library, and you're drawing a ton of cards, and you're just flipping through stuff with like brainstorms, and occasionally you'll get the Dragonstorm and Mind's Desire that you need, and you'll dump a bunch of stuff out on the table, and hopefully you'll win. You will, and I'm not patient enough to wait for the perfect hand, so sometimes I would do all this stuff, and I would net like 2 dragons and nothing else, and you know, that's just something that would happen. If you're a more patient player, you could probably pull off something better. Other times, the deck actually turns into a little bit of a dragon beatdown deck. And you've got enough dragons and stuff here to be able to pull off the beatdown plan if you need it. One recommendation I have is if you do Dragonstorm for a bunch, not to pull every single dragon out and put it into play. I will always leave at least 2 dragons behind. Specifically because if somebody does manage to play like wing shards or some other form of removal that'll keep, like if you dump out a bunch of dragons and you have to wait for your next turn to kill everybody, somebody's going to Wrath, and then somebody's going to remove your graveyard, and all of a sudden you have no threats left and you've got nothing to do. So always keep 1 or 2 behind. And then, let's see, there was something else I wanted to talk about. Let's look at the stats here real quick. The average CMC in the deck is 3.5, which is good considering it's a dragon-based deck. Obviously a lot of 1 and 2 drops and 3 drops. There are a couple extra 6 drops because dragons cost a lot. You know, that's what's going to happen. There's about 14 instants and 15 sorceries. So like 30% of the deck is instants and sorceries. So, you know, sometimes you epic experiment for a bunch and you don't get a whole lot, but sometimes you do. I think that's about it, you know. This was a fun deck to play, except for those turns that lasted like 5 minutes, and you're like screwing around more and more and more, and then people start getting annoyed, and then occasionally somebody will drop. It's a little bit of a different enough deck that people are willing to see what happens. It's not just like a blam, I throw everything on the ground or on the table and then, you know, win instantly. I still got to attack with dragons. So, like I said, it's not a perfect deck, but Melek helped. He wasn't entirely necessary, but he was good at doing what he did. And there you go. All right, we'll take a look at the deck in action here. Go to puremtgo.com. I almost forgot about this. And you'll see it all nice and neat. Laid out like this with everything spread out. And yeah, it looks like there's a decent number of instants and sorceries in the deck. So there you go. Alright, you guys. We'll see it in action. Thanks.